Canadian University Sports announced that its championships and its sports for this season up until the end of the year are gone. Is this catastrophic, or is this going to be barely noticeable on the Canadian sports landscape? We're going to dive into that. No Vanier Cup, no Mitchell Bowl, no soccer, no rugby, no whatever. Canadian University Sports has been put off because of the coronavirus. Students athletes can't be on campus anyway. So everything is sort of predictable, but here we are, Steve Milton. Is this going to be a disaster for university sports, or, considering how many people watch or how few people watch, it's really not going to be that big a deal?
I think they'll eventually get over it, but I think it's catastrophic, you guys, in this sense, for what it stands for. For what it stands for the thousands of athletes who, yes, they'll get another year of eligibility, but that doesn't jive necessarily with what their educational requirements are. So they may end up losing a quarter or 20% of their athletic career. But also, it underlines the severity of what's been going on and looks like will continue to go on. And I think that's why it's catastrophic.
Rick?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Listen, as a sports fan, you're either into watching U Sports events or you're not. There's not a lot of gray area when it comes to watching the Vanier Cup or watching, a rugby final, which you would have to, physically go to because it's not on TV or on radio, at least in these parts. But yeah, catastrophic for especially those not only the fifth year athletes who are going or trying to go on to bigger and better things, but also think about the high school graduates who are now coming into their first year of U Sports eligibility. They're really hogtied in launching their U Sports career.
Bubba, you call MAC football games. You're up close with this. What do you think?
It's funny. I'm going to use the old Steve Milton run down the middle line here. And that is, in a sense here, I don't know if it's catastrophic because I've always deemed U Sports in its common sense in all sports as a niche sport. And I believe your fans, though you're not going to get anything for at least this fall semester, you're not going to lose them because I believe when the sport comes back, you're going to gain them back. The problem is here, without any type of national sponsor or national television broadcast, this sport to me will remain leveled off where it is right now. So to me, yes, it hurts because you're not going to see any of these championships, but I do believe the people that care about it, you're not going to lose them. They'll be back next year or even in the winter if coronavirus permits.
Yeah, I got to be with Bubba on this one. I can't see it being considered catastrophic. I feel great sympathy for the athletes, as Steve and Rick say, because of what they're going to lose. But when you go to a lot of these games, and great level of sports. I've written a lot about like MAC volleyball, one of the best teams, not just in the country but in North America. And there's often maybe half a gym full of people. It's an underappreciated brand of sports, but because of that, because you don't have people watching, not a lot of people anyway, if it goes away, I don't think it's the tree falling in the forest for a lot of people. And I guarantee you, what I wrote about this week when I said it was canceled, I bet a lot of people didn't even slow down as they were reading that online. Oh, who cares?
Well, and I think that's fine, and it's a fair observation, but it also attacks, and that's just why I say it's catastrophic. I think it attacks and shows us the fabric of what university sports is about. There really are now, and it's only burgeoning, there are only 3 sports, all male, that actually have some kind of agreement now with professional leagues, and that's men's basketball, men's soccer, and men's football, if I'm not mistaken. And that's not really formal agreement with men's football. It's just, that's where lots of the players are coming from for the CFL. But it's the way it's interwoven into just another part of campus life. Maybe not necessarily that people go to the game, but it speaks off also to what are the residences going to look like over the next year or two? How is that all going to look like? The social distancing in classes, the on-campus fabric of on-campus life. And you've written about that yourself, right? Outside of the sports part, the way MAC's going to look this fall. And we don't know if and when that'll change, if it becomes locked in. So that's why I think it's catastrophic, because it says it's more not about what it does on the sporting scene as much, but how that sporting scene weaves into what we know as campus life, university experience. And I think that's changed forever.
Really adds to the empty feeling of what we may all experience just as, sports fanatics. Is here's another set of events or six championships that we will not be able to consume in terms of content. And there's going to be, for many of these athletes, a lost year because they won't be able to compete in said sports. So catastrophic from an athlete perspective as well. The schools are also going to lose out on that revenue opportunity. And in terms of recruiting, there's going to be a lot of lost energy that has gone into recruiting for this year that is not going to materialize.
Lost revenue, but in some ways, what does it cost McMaster to run that football program? So much that they have to have these football galas. It's a very, very expensive sport. I would even say even the women's basketball team, you're traveling all over the province. I think it spends more money. Sports at the university level in this country spend more money than they actually get back.
It does.
And I think that's maybe even going to help the universities in maybe recouping some money. And they'll never say this because you're right, Steve. It's an experience. It's part of campus life. It is something that these kids will never forget. I personally, as a 50-something-year-old man, will never forget calling the McMaster Marauders Yates Cup champions on radio. It's part of me. It's something I will never forget. But I still believe on the whole, for the school, not spending the money, not running those buses, the hotel costs, they couldn't even afford to fly me out for the Mitchell Bowl because it was so expensive to send out those kids to Calgary. So in some ways, maybe it does for a 1 year or maybe a one semester sort of purpose, sort of help.
Well, I don't know about help, but I don't think it hurts in that way.
Help is the wrong word.
No, but the sponsors are not going to be involved either. So, who knows where it goes. My other question is this. We've heard from a lot of different, not just sports, a lot of organizations say, when we've been in this shutdown, now's the time to reestablish, to revisit what we do and how we do things. And is there a chance here that we've stepped away to do something different, do something better that makes us stronger or more appealing when we come out of this thing? Can that be applied here to Canadian university sports for the next 5, 6, 7 months while they are in lockdown? Is there something they can do so that this discussion that we're having becomes completely moot next time it happens, that it really is absolutely catastrophic, that way more people are engaged in this? What do they do? How do they do it?
Well, I think you could see a number of things happen here. And I think if they're smart, and let's assume that because everybody there is in a place of higher learning, you'd like to think that they're smart, but you use this time. And there's so many musicians have talked about using this time to become more creative because they have there's nothing, they can't perform or anything like that. So they're trying to use it to build up the pyramid, the base of the pyramid of their talent and what they're eventually going to have to offer. And that could be, I'm wondering if you might see that this might be the thing. Let's just take men's football, for instance, that you might see the culling into and it's been talked about for many, many, many years. I mean, maybe going back to 20 years, some kind of super league or
cross country.
Yeah, that kind of thing. The ones that can sell, and the ones that can't don't, and maybe those programs end. I think that'd be very, very bad for it. But football isn't necessarily a participatory sport anymore when you look at the numbers, right? It's kind of an elite sport, and the athletes are way better, the coaching's way better, the kids are way, way better down at a lower age. But it's not like 25 years ago, the number of kids playing high school ball, that kind of thing. So I think there'll be a real analysis of type of thing, and maybe more look at more involvement, more like things that involve more people. And I don't know what that does. That swimming.
Is there a marketing way though? Is there anything, Bubba or Rick, is there anything marketing wise that you can do in this time, or a change of something so that when it comes back, people go, yeah, I've got to get to that game? Because right now, I'm sorry, I truly wish that was the case where everybody said, I've got to go to that game, but I just rarely see it. Is there anything that Canadian university sports can do to change that?
Well, I know that, U Sports, formerly CIS, formerly CIAU, has done, a number of refreshes over the years. So from a marketing perspective, maybe a refresh would work, but I don't think you're going to, obtain a greater amount of people in the stands or, a larger amount of supporters. I think U Sports, and really when you look across the landscape during these times, is that a lot of companies, a lot of entities are finding efficiencies, or at least looking that way, and U Sports might have to go that way. So maybe it's a few less teams, or a few less players per team. That might be the direction that they're going in, which might help reduce costs and such. But from a competitive standpoint, might leave some high-profile athletes or some really talented athletes on the wayside.
But that's not going to draw more people into the stands.
Well, I think what you've got to do to get more people into the stands is, and I think this goes for anything, high school sports, anything. If you make it important to someone, and I'm saying to fans, you make it important to the school. And I'm not just saying, again, to that niche crowd, not important to the niche crowd. You make it important to everyone, then all of a sudden it becomes a, quote, big deal. And that starts with coverage on national television. And until the U Sports, and I know they understand that they have a brand new president that started this week, that should be one of the top first things on the agenda, is how do we make ourselves mainstream? How do we put ourselves and our product in front of the Canadian public to say, hey, as we've all four of us have discussed, all four of us have reported, all four of us know deep down, this is a really good product in a lot of sports. And people should see this. But until you make it important, and that starts with national sponsorships, you've got to get out there. They need to be on the TSNs, the Sportsnet, and not on CBC Maine, not CBC.ca. That is a big, big challenge for this. And you know what, guys? I know we're kind of talking about the Ontario University sports. I would say this also to the Canadian college sports as well too. You talk about forgotten. That OCAA product is incredibly forgotten and underplayed.
Yeah, and
the big curveball is you need the sponsorship, because a television network is not going to say, all right, we want to blow this thing up by exposing it more, which they already did. We see the Vanier Cup, we're seeing the UTEC Bowl and the Mitchell Bowl, but we need to see regular season games. You look at the NCAA with football or basketball, even lacrosse, it's on TV all the time. Every weekend you can catch a game. We can't do that with U Sports events. We have to see more of that. But to have that, we need the sponsorship dollars to offset the costs of the networks to broadcast these games. That's where it begins.
Even more now, because with the change in pro sports, which we've discussed at least twice in this panel, they're going to become more and more dependent on some kinds of broadcasts. A lot of it might be streaming, but a lot of it is going to be the TV broadcast. They're not going to have fans in the stadium, so they're going to be coming harder after the sports networks and over-the-air networks and streaming networks and all of those kinds of things than they are now, and even are now. And that's the atmosphere in which all of the suggestions we're making for U Sport is going to be facing. They're going to walk into that atmosphere themselves. Where there's a heightened competition for that airtime and those sponsorship dollars, because it's far more dependent. It's going to be far more dependent on broadcast now.
And there's one other thing that I've never figured out why we can't do this or why it doesn't work. But you look down in the States, and not only for sponsorships or for money, but for people in the stands is alumni. And if you go to a school in the States, you are forever a part of that school. Here, yeah, you may say, like when someone says, Rick, Bubba, where did you go? Whatever. But it's not emblazoned. It's not tattooed on you like in the States. And I don't know how you change that. If you somehow could make that more of a big deal, you might then get more people who care more about these things. I think it doesn't have to start with alumni, but alumni has to be a big part of this. And that seems to be a gigantic hurdle.
Well, you look at the two great revivals in OUA sport or OUA football, and I'm talking about Guelph and Carleton. That's exactly what happened. It's exactly what happened. It either came from one or two major alumni, or an upswell as it did an upsurge in Carleton. And boy, but that was hard for them to achieve that.
But that's one, and look, they appreciate it. That's one or two very wealthy alumni. I'm talking about the idea of you got to put 5,000 or 6,000 of those people at the games, that they show up, or for different sports, different numbers.
That happens in some places. It happens a bit here if the people stay in town, and that's one of the reasons the universities really want to see people stay in the town where they went to university, because it's much easier when you're there. We wrote about it last week or a couple of weeks ago in conjunction to the Commonwealth Games with McMaster supporting it. like formally and with some money. Part of it is to keep the people here that they've educated, because if they're here, they will have more engagement with the university on all levels, and sports would be one of those.
I think that's a
There's two
cultural
parts
thing,
of.
guys. Sorry,
Go ahead, Buzz.
I'm sorry, guys. I think that's a cultural thing, and I think that's going to be a hard sell for whatever the reason is. I don't know. We just here as Canadians, not just here in Ontario, we don't place our pride for our school like we do with Americans. It's just not inbred in us, and I don't know how you change that. I wish it would change, because I think you would get maybe not the same, but a similar sort of attitude, a similar participation in the sports, again, from the alumni. We're very lucky here in Hamilton. We do get a little bit of that at McMaster and Mohawk, but I just don't think that exists everywhere else. And maybe some other schools like Queens, you talk about Guelph, they just built a brand new athletic complex based on their alumni. So I don't know how you make that change, but I think that's a cultural thing on the way we look at our universities post-education.
I agree with the Bubs. That's a big canyon to jump for alumni to go back to their schools and go to a specific sporting event. There really isn't the incentive to attend a big event just because you're an alumni. Do you get a free jersey? Do you get a prime spot? It's not broadcast on TV. Why am I here? There is that empty feeling in terms of alumni to support the team, because there's not a lot of other ones out there doing the same thing.
And I'll tell you why that's so important, in addition to just the support behind the alumni. Bubby, you talk about TV. We have seen football games go on TV and some other sports. Nothing looks worse than when you have a football game on TV and there's 1,000 people in the stands and the thing looks empty, because it sends the message this doesn't matter. And if you suddenly put full stadiums, full grandstands for all these games, I can't guarantee you, but I would be very certain that TV would be way more inclined to say, hey, this is a big deal then. Look how many people are coming out to this. The message that it sends when there's not many people there it's not a good look on TV, and you can only hide that so many ways. We want to hear from you. Is this shutdown of Canadian university sports going to be a catastrophe? I mean, obviously, you don't even have to tell us it will be for the student athletes. We know that's the case. But will this be a catastrophe overall, or is this going to be just, no one's even going to really notice? Our Twitter handles are on the screen. Let us know. They're going to come up in a second. Also, follow us down below. Catch up on all our videos when they come out. We appreciate you watching us. We'll see you soon.